Hi, everybody. Welcome to our February New Mexico Rainforest University Center seminar. Today we have Phil Wilton with us. Phil offers significant experience as an executive in national and multinational companies in both the UK and the USA. And he's developed a strategic planning model that enables the evaluation of an organization's resources and capabilities and market impacts on its business. So we're really excited to have him with us. He's recently written a book on his work, which will be published sometime in March. And we actually have the opportunity today that everyone who is attending this webinar, your name and your email will be put into a randomizer, and one person will win a copy of his book once it's published sometime in March. So the presentation is going to be organized into 3 different sections today. As you come up with questions, you can type your questions in the chat, and then there will be an opportunity for Phil to answer those questions at several different points in the presentation. So here is Phil.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. And thank you for coming to this presentation. Just to give a little bit of context here, we're going to be going through 3 different matrices that are tried and tested and well known in the industry. But what I've done in my career is actually got these 3 matrices to interconnect with each other so that you can collect a lot of data. And it's primarily for when you're planning to do strategic planning, because you need to pivot because your business has been disrupted in some way, maybe, or maybe you just need to pivot your business so that you can get more business. So we're going to look at 3 different matrices, and the first one is going to be the SWOT matrix. The other 2 are the resource-based view to the bottom right here, and the 3rd one is the 5 forces over here. So first off, we're going to have a look at the SWOT matrix. We're going to go through how this is laid out. Most of you probably know or have seen some kind of boxes similar to this, which is the SWOT matrix. It's going to be the most influential and the most informative matrix that you will use out of the 3, because you'll start with this matrix and you're also going to finish with it, because as you go through the next 2 matrices, the data that you collect there actually transpose onto the SWOT. And effectively what you're going to be doing is building a master SWOT as you go through. So I guess my first question that you can enter into the chat is, how many people have used a SWOT before? And so you can just enter in the yes or no. And as a second question, what have you used the SWOT for? Because it can be used for many different things. So let's move on. What I've done here is I've taken the standard SWOT matrix and I've split it horizontally. And the reason for that is because there's an internal and there's an external side to a SWOT. The internal side of a SWOT, it's actually what's happening inside your organization. And I'm going to call it an organization as we go through, but an organization can be a company, it can be an LLC, it can be a private company, it can be a society, it can be a union, it can be anything. But for simplicity, we'll just keep it called as an organization. So we're looking at, on the internal side of your organization, what your strengths and weaknesses are. Or maybe another way of saying that is, what is the organization good at and what is the organization not good at? Sometimes people struggle to find some strengths and weaknesses, but if you ask the question in a different way, what is the organization good at and what is it not good at? then you start to build some data, and you get those, you start adding those attributes down onto the SWOT. The external side of the SWOT appertains to opportunities. These are areas that you have the opportunity to exploit and develop in your business, but you haven't yet done so. And the threats. And the threats are typically outside pressures that are made against the organization. They can be, for example, laws, rules, and regulations. So, for example, I was in the semiconductor industry, and we use dangerous chemicals and gases, and there are laws and there are rules and there are regulations about how you use those gases and those chemicals. So just because it's a threat doesn't mean to say that it's completely coercive to your business. It doesn't necessarily have to be. You just have to make sure that you're following the laws so that you're using it in a safe manner. So now we've looked at it on a horizontal basis, we're going to have a look at it on a vertical basis. So when I split it out, on the left-hand side, the strengths and opportunities are all helpful attributes that are going to be within your organization. And on the right-hand side, you have the weaknesses and the threats, and they're the harmful attributes that you need to either mitigate and change into a strength, or you've got to get rid of it somehow. So that's the kind of makeup of how you bring a SWOT together. Jump back one here. So you've got 4 boxes, and these boxes need attributes put into them. So what are the attributes? The attributes are they should not be 1 or 2 word statements. They should be longer than 2 words, but not a huge paragraph or anything. So for example, in strengths, you could say culture was cohesive and it was disciplined. So when you come back to look at this attribute at a later time, after you've gathered all the information from this matrix and the other 2 matrices, you understand what you've written there. So a weakness, for example, could be 20, 30 hires per month is a large turnover, all right? Because 20 or 30 hires a month may not be a large turnover in some companies, but in other companies it may well be. And we can talk a little bit more about those as we go through on the SWOT side. Some attributes that you put down will be more important than other attributes. Obviously, and what you have to do is, when you've got your data compiled, is go through all the attributes and say to yourself, okay, kind of categorize them. What's really important for us to look at first, and what's not so important for us to look at secondly. And what you'll find is that attributes in all boxes will have commonalities, sometimes with other attributes in adjacent boxes. Attributes, what would they be? Well, they could include any effects that you have on the business, any events. It could be how you conduct your workflows and your processes within the organization. It could be about the products or the services that you're selling. And it can also include the people in the organization. And I would suggest in the strengths and weaknesses, you would also add in culture of the company and how that's portrayed within inside the organization. On the opportunities and threats, it's the same attributes more or less, but you would include laws, rules, and regulations when you get to the threat side. So what would be a good example of a law? So health and safety is a law that all companies have to perform their business within a certain health and safety laws. Now that's a threat, so it has to stay in the threat box. But what you may have in your organization is that you may have a very good record on health and safety. You may have very little accidents, whatever your business is, maybe a gym or something. But if you've got good health and safety record, and maybe you've got awards for it, then you've turned that threat into a strength, because you can advertise that in your strengths as we have a really good health and safety record. So not all threats will be totally coercive to you. It's up to you to find how you can mitigate those threats and turn them into a strength, or into an opportunity that later becomes into a strength. So you have complete control over the strengths and weaknesses and the opportunities. And the only box that you don't have complete control in is the red box, which is the threats. And primarily because that's outside influences that are impacting your organization. So when you're in an organization, if you've, wrong way, sorry. If you're in a medium-sized company, or maybe even some smaller companies where you've got responsibilities with different people. So for simplicity, I'm just going to call this the sales, marketing, and service department. It's a good idea to get as many different viewpoints about what's going on in the organization. So if you're looking to pivot your organization because of some disruption, or because you need to change your business, then you should get each of the people that are running or in charge of those particular divisions or sections within the organization to complete their own SWOT. And so they would do a SWOT on their, so sales would do a SWOT on their organization, marketing on theirs, and services on theirs. And so they're as you're doing your individual strengths and weaknesses, which are internal, so that's your organization. The manager of the sales organization is going to list his strengths and weaknesses, what he's good at and what he's not so good at there. His external, in this case, is not outside the company. His external is the marketing and the services people that he works with, because they impact his business when he's trying to sell to the customer at the end of the day. And the same would happen with the marketing guy. He has to work with the sales, and he may think there's some detriment to what the sales are doing that he thinks need to be improved upon, and likewise for the services side. So the other point this underlines is whenever you're completing a SWOT, it has to be honest and truthful. And every comment, every attribute that you put into a SWOT is a benefit. It doesn't matter if, marketing doesn't give me all the right information on the values that my product has that I can sell to the customer. That's not knocking the marketing department. That's raising an issue that needs to be understood in the company. And if you can rectify that and change that from a weakness into a strength, then you're only in a better position. So what I did was I decided to have a look at some SWOTs that I've completed in the past. And I've done a number of SWOTs with Harvard Business Review. And one of the SWOTs we did was on a company called Tessai. And Tessai is a cleaning company to the Japan Railway East organization in Japan. And the cleaning company was causing the delay of the bullet trains that go into Tokyo Station in Japan. They have quite a number of platforms in Tokyo Station, and I've actually been there, and I've actually been on the bullet trains. And what happens is that every 3 minutes, a train comes into one of the platforms. A bullet train comes into one of the platforms. And when the passengers come off, there is 7 minutes that has to be, the train has to be completely cleaned. And after 7 minutes, the cleaning company comes off, which is Tessai, and then the new passengers get on and the bullet train leaves the station. So there was an issue with getting this completed. And I want to show you the SWOT that we made. And one of the good things about following the format of a SWOT is it's not only a good place to collect data, but it's a good visual. And so when you look at the visual of this SWOT, based on what I said earlier, when we're looking at the vertical side, you've got more issues or more attributes on the right-hand side than you have on the left-hand side. So you know that this is, you've got major problems with this company. The other thing I liked about this SWOT is that it is one of the few that I've done where you get an attribute in all 4 boxes. It's not often you get an attribute that relates to all 4 boxes. You know, the health and safety one we had was the threats, and it went into strengths if you've got awards or you have a good record. But on this one, we've got employees in the threats, in the opportunities, in the strengths, and in the weaknesses. And if you look at the list of attributes just in the employee sections, which is the blue, then you can still see that we still got a lot of problems on the right-hand side, which are harmful to the organization. So what I did was I've extracted that and put that into a separate kind of mini SWOT, and I've color-coded it for ease so that we can go through it. This is where you find when you start collecting data, you put down your attributes as you're identifying them into each of the relevant boxes. But when you start to look at them, you can see that they're cross-pollinating, and you can get different messages coming for exactly the same attribute, the employees. So let's have a look at the threat side down here first, in the bottom right. Here we have recruiting talented employees was difficult. Why was it difficult? Because it's known as a low 3K job. And a 3K job, so in Japanese, that's you can practice the Japanese. I'm not going to do that. It means it's dirty, difficult, and it's a dangerous job. Potential employees have past career difficulties, and because it was known as a low 3K job in Japan, then those employees, the potential employees, were people that had difficulties with their previous employers, and or employees that could only get jobs like a low 3K job in Japan. And the prospective turnover for the jobs was a high turnover as well. So when we go up and we look in the weaknesses side, we can see we've got 20, 30 hires per month. And that was a large turnover for Tessai. Okay, and they could also see that accidents were increasing, and a lot of the employees were just part-time. But there were some good things that came out when we was reviewing the case study, and is that the women in the team really valued the teamwork that they had, and that the culture was cohesive and it was disciplined. And then on the opportunity side, the employees had this desire that they wanted to help the customers more than they were currently doing. And they also wanted the new people that were coming into the business to be able to be trained better than what they were currently doing. So then when we start going back and have a look at the weaknesses again, one of the things that we found while we was going through the case study was that the Tessai cleaning procedures for the trains when they were coming in, the seat cleaning, all right, was causing delays. And when we were going through the story that was presented to us, we found that those people that were longer term in the organization at Tessai were getting benchmarked by the new people that were coming in. So they began to get experience. They began to apply different workflows and processes to the cleaning procedures. And they found that deviating from the Tessai procedures actually cut the cleaning times. So when we came towards the end of the case study, we saw that the car cleaning times increased by 12% over a 4-year period. So it just goes to show you, when you start putting in attributes into one area, you don't know what the result is going to be until you've collected all the data and you see it collectively in this form of a SWOT. Now, the two I've left out till last is the strengths and the weaknesses about the staff, the existing management staff of Tessai, and the new manager that was brought in to work everything out. So the employees, when they were interviewed, saying the senior staff were scary and intimidating, they were scolding and they were yelling, and that produced a lack of confidence in the employees. And you can probably understand why there were part-time employees, and maybe why accidents were happening, and why it was difficult to recruit when you had this kind of management of the cleaning process going on. So J.R. East decided to send over Yabe-san, who had 39 years of explicit and tacit knowledge of running railways, their workflows and their procedures, and he'd worked on the job with the Tessai employees. The end result to this case study, it's an interesting one, you can get it online if you want to, is that Yabe-san turned this organization around and turned it from being a low 3K job into a more prestigious job, to such an effect that Harvard were impressed with how he did this, and they went over and did a case study on this company. So again, you know, be careful, don't make immediate judgments about the attributes you're putting down, because until you've got them all down and you see what the whole picture is, then you can see what's going on. So here we can have discussion of questions if anybody's got any.
There isn't anything in the chat yet, so you can go on if you want.
We'll give it a minute or so.
If you want to just continue on, and then if things pop up, I'll let you know.
Is everybody shy to ask questions?
I guess.
Okay.
Oh, there's one now. Do you ever find that your clients are resistant to the SWOT exercise?
Yes, quite often. And that's because they don't understand how the SWOT process works. They don't understand the format of the matrix as I've explained it to you. And I think like one of the things I said earlier, when you ask somebody to say, okay, tell me what strengths you got and what weaknesses you got, you kind of sit there and you have to give it a think, and you're not sure if you're going to come up with the right things. But if you rephrase it and say, look, you know, tell me what you're good at, and tell me what's not going well with the area of responsibility you got, then there's more of a willingness to give you some feedback. And I think it's just alien to people. They know about SWOT. Many people can talk about SWOT, but they don't actually do SWOTs. And it's not really that difficult to do. It's something that you can easily teach and easily get some feedback on. Does that answer the question? I hope so.
Yes, thank you. How often would you recommend doing a SWOT exercise?
That's a good question. Well, let me come back and say, okay, what did you use a SWOT for? And so I don't know what you put into the chat at this particular time because I'm not looking, but you can use a SWOT on your organization. You can use your SWOT on departments or sections within an organization. You can use your SWOT on individuals as a performance. You can even use a SWOT if you are trying to build a resume. You can do a SWOT on yourself. You can do a SWOT on products that your company or your organization is selling, or even on the services that it provides. And you can even use a SWOT if you want to gauge what your competition is doing. So you can do a SWOT on your competition. You generally go into doing a SWOT or any of these matrices when you have a organization that has been disrupted by a same or similar product coming in, or you have a new competitor coming in to disturb your market. And you've got to now evaluate what effect that competitor has on you and what effect you're going to have on that competitor coming in. So there's no fixed schedule for doing a SWOT. It's when you're seeing things are not working correctly. That's the telltale sign. When things are not working correctly, then you need to start looking at what are you doing right and what are you doing wrong, and what is the market doing against you, and where do you prevail in that market. Does that answer the question?
Yes. So we don't have any more questions right now. So if you want to go on to the next section.
Okay, the next section is another matrix, and I've actually designed this matrix in a similar fashion to the SWOT-Matrix. So we're going to move into the resource-based view of strategy. And I'm going to ask the same question again. How many people have heard of the resource-based view of strategy, which could also be known as the VRIO? So if you go into the yes or no, that would be great. And if you have used it, then when have you used it and how have you used it? So the resource-based view of strategy, I've designed this in the same way as SWOT-Matrix. It's for simplicity, because what you're going to be doing is connecting all these matrices at the end of the day. But we're going to be looking at a value or an organization's assets, its rarity, uncommon assets, products, processes, or persons. What is imitable in an organization, how organizations can be duplicated or substituted, and how an organization is arranged and operates. And I've got inside and outside again, but primarily the resource-based view of strategy is a matrix that's solely and purely looking inside your organization, not outside your organization. The reason I put inside for the value and rarity is that it is pretty uncommon that anybody outside of the organization can look at what your values are in an organization. No, that's not, it's difficult for them to find out how your values are in an organization, and what's rare in your organization. And it's not until you're actually successful after some period of time that they begin to realize what you're doing within your organization to make it more valuable and rarer. And we've got an example of that coming a little later with Apple. Outside of your organization, Imitable and how you systematically arrange the resources and capabilities in your organization, they're more seeable outside, and so I've identified them as outside of the looking outside of the organization, not outside per se, because this is, as I say, this framework is strictly for looking inside. It's a critical in-depth look at your resources and your capabilities, and getting your resources and capabilities in tune is the key to giving yourself a competitive advantage. So what are resources? And resources come in two forms. They come in tangible forms, and I've listed some of them here. All right, so in terms of financial, debt could be a resource. I've identified debt and liabilities, and you might think to yourself, well, hang on a minute, that means we're borrowing money and we're owed money. But if you manage your debt and your liability correctly, they can be assets. Don't think that just because it's a negative that it can't be managed. Physical assets, they can be, as you see there, I'm not going to read verbatim from this, that highlighted the location. I'm sure some of you that have done some marketing know that location, location, location has been one of those famous sayings for quite some time. So it could be that wherever you're locating your business is a great asset for you. Access to low-cost inputs. What does that mean? Well, I think the easiest example to give here, because these are in-depth subject matters, is Walmart. Walmart's logistics, the way it handles its logistics and strategically locates its logistics, enables its stores to be serviced on a very regular basis and to have very competitive pricing. And so they have access to low-cost inputs. And then there's, what do you do inside your organization? What products and what technology do you use to make things operate properly within the organization you're in? So I've put robotics there, for example. You may be in a manufacturing line where robotics and the way robotics are placed in the chain makes it a quick and efficient and cost-effective way of producing the products. It could be just software. It could be an SAP program that you've developed that makes operating your organization unique and possible. There are many different ways that you can see that you can affect on how you use products and technology inside a company to make the organization more efficient. And then there are intangible assets. Intangible assets are very difficult for people to see and to imitate. And in organizational assets, again, I'm not going to read through that. You can read through that, but I've highlighted history. History is something that a lot of people don't pay attention to. How did your company or your organization get to where it is today? Whether it be good in its operation or whether it could do better in its operation. How was it that you got to where you were today? And understanding how you did that will give you a lot of attributes that you can put down into this particular matrix. Human resources, and that compiles of, I'm focusing here on knowledge, and there are two types of knowledge. There's explicit knowledge. There's knowledge. Explicit knowledge is what you learn in school and university and what you learn on the job when you're actually working. And that gives you experience and judgment. And then there's tacit knowledge, and the amount of people that underestimate the value of tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is that knowledge that you've gained, which is above explicit knowledge, that allows you to perform a job function, a workflow, or a process better than it was before. It enables your risk-taking propensity to improve, the wisdom of individuals to improve when they make decisions. Patents are an intellectual property, as are trademarks, and that's a pretty obvious intangible resource. Once you own them, you've got them. Branding is is good for reputation, and we're going to look at a couple of examples of what that means in the next few slides. And market share. Market share is how you organize the capabilities within your organization. So you heard me say about resources and capabilities. How you manage your resources and capabilities allows you to expand or promote your business into a market share. So it comes down to the workflows and processes. And that's the effective way that you organize a company. Let me explain workflows and processes a little bit more. If you take a tree, the trunk of the organization is the tree, and coming off the tree is all these different branches. So all those different branches will be all the different parts of the company. So going back to the SWOT example, you've got sales, you've got marketing, you've got service. You've got 3 branches there, and each of those works in a different way because they're doing different things. But all of those workflows, when they come together, they support the trunk of the organization and become the process, the way the organization effectively processes those workflows to be able to present itself to the market and sell its products to the market. So let's have a look at a couple of valuable companies. Value is not necessarily means in the terms of what its dollar value is of the company, but it's about, can you innovate your product so that you can get more from your product, or can you innovate and add to your products? So this is Walt Disney. Walt Disney has iconic characters. Nobody else has these characters. They can't have them because they're owned by Walt Disney. And they were originally in cartoons. But as technology has been improving, they transferred from cartoons and went into filming. And then they went into theme parks. And there's a lot of theme parks around the world that are extremely popular, pre-COVID days, of course, and extremely profitable for the organization. And they went into TV and into publishing and into web portals as well. So it's a company that's got the basics of iconics characters that they've actually built and developed upon as they grew. This one, you know, if you took the word Nike out, you would still know this. If I didn't put Nike there, you would know this immediately. Nike has 95% of their income from running shoes, basketball. They have the Michael Jordan franchise, soccer, and sportswear. And they're all quality products. But when you think that Nike started with running shoes, and now you can go and see Nike stores, and I love going into a Nike store because I do like buying their stuff. It's good stuff, it's good quality, and it's a good price. Coca-Cola. Now there's a company that's been around for decades and decades, and I'm sure you've all heard about the Cola Wars. But Coca-Cola started with this little guy on the left here. Although this is a plastic bottle of that version, this was the iconic Coca-Cola bottle, and they still own the rights to that bottle. But look at all the, due to the Cola Wars with Pepsi-Cola, look, and all the and other competitors in water. Look at all the different products that they've now got. There's a huge amount of products there. Another thing you may not know about Coca-Cola is that during the Second World War, the US government asked Coca-Cola if they would supply Coke to their troops in Europe and in Asia, and to supply it for no more than $1 a bottle. And Coca-Cola did that. And so that launched Coca-Cola into the global market, which they continued to operate after the Second World War. So they innovated themselves onto a global basis as well. L'Oreal, they started with face creams. They've got a whole range of products, as you can see there. And then they innovated and expanded their portfolio. They also do cosmetics for Yves Saint Laurent, Lancome, Armani, Ralph Lauren, Valentino, and a few others. So you see that they continue to innovate as they go through time. This is Lego. Lego is, I think Lego is a great brand. I'm after getting a Lego kit of the Tower of London, the one where the bridge where that goes up and down. But you can get starships, all kinds of kits with Lego. But they expanded from just doing plastic bricks to adding gears and figurines, because you can now get Lego figurines. If you look inside this picture here, The picture actually is it's the front end, and it's a life-size front end of a London Underground train, the subway in the UK. And it's all built out of Lego bricks. And the soldier in there is the figurines, is one of many different figurines you can get now from Lego. And this is, and you may not know this because there's nothing on it to say what it is, but this is IKEA. IKEA is a multinational organization that you can buy everything for your home. You can literally furnish your whole home on a visit to IKEA. And they've just improved year over year after decade after decade. They're one of the most biggest and profitable companies in the whole world. And everybody knows this one. It's a kind of a bit of an older photo, I know, but they've also innovated from here into data storage and cloud storage as well. So that's value in a company. Rare. I put Tesla because Tesla is rare. When Tesla launched e-vehicles, they didn't just come in to make a complete electric vehicle that you could buy that wasn't a petrol-electric vehicle. It's just an electric vehicle. They also disrupted the auto dealerships across the whole of the US and subsequently across the world, because they don't have dealerships. They decided to do what Apple decided to do, and that was to have retail stores in the high street. And I remember going into one of the first Tesla stores in Santana Row in San Francisco, which is a famous street for having Gucci and Armani and Ralph Lauren and all those places. And in the middle of the street was a Tesla shop with a Tesla car and the Tesla base, so you could see how the battery worked. So they're a great company. They lost money when they started, but they're very profitable now. And they've innovated. They've taken their batteries for the cars and put them into power storage. So you can get power walls, which are down here. And this up here is a complete bank of mega packs that power a complete city in Australia. And Elon Musk was challenged by the county or the council of the town in Australia that if he could get the fully sustainable power within 3 months, then they would pay him a undisclosed sum. I don't know, but he did it, and they paid him. And the truck on the right there is a new innovation as well. And I know of a building company that is taking delivery of one of these in later this year. Imitability. This is a great example. Southwest decided that they wanted to enter the aeroplane industry, and they decided they wanted to do it different. So they took the 737 aircraft, the same one that's used by United, American, and many other national carriers around the world, and they wanted to go to market differently. And so what they did was they developed a strategy. This is an activity map, again from Harvard, one of my favorites. And the black circles are the strategies that they deployed, and the lighter circles are the tactics that they undertook to actually achieve the strategies. So I'm only going to cover 2 here. They decided to go short-haul point-to-point routes between mid-sized cities and secondary airports. So I found out when they started off that they started off at Dallas Love Field Airport and not Fort Worth. And Love Field Airport is not far away from what I understand from Fort Worth. But there's an advantage to landing at secondary airports, and that is the landing fees. The landing fees for secondary airports are way lower than they are for main airports. So they save a lot of money there. Over here, there's lean, highly productive ground crews and gate crews. And they achieve this by paying high compensation to employees. They had flexible union contracts so that they mitigated the amount of union strikes that going on. And they also gave a high level of employee stock ownership to their gate crews. So when a Southwest plane comes in, everybody makes sure that it gets turned around extremely quickly. So it's a great example of how you can imitate another organization and do things differently. And the last one I'm going to end with here is our friend James Bond. Now, I don't know who your favorite James Bond is. Mine was Sean Connery and Daniel Craig. Everybody's got their favorites, and it's the one that's discussed and debated over quite often. But think about this. James Bond is a product, and he's a very successful product. The Bond franchise for the Broccoli family is enormously profitable. We've all got a new Bond film that's going to be coming out, hopefully in October, and hopefully we can go to the big screen and see it. And I have no doubt that if that happens, it's going to be packed. So it's just a great product. It's very rare. I mean, who can really copy this and imitate it? Well, closest I think that came to it was Jason Bourne. But that franchise is finished. But you know, what makes this a really great organized franchise is the way that it's organized. When you watch James Bond, and this applies to any film you watch, you probably get up and leave the auditorium before the credits are finished. But if you watch the credits, it's all of those people, that long list of people, the people that do Craig's hair, who gets his suits, the people who supply the cars, the stuntmen, the people who do the catering for everybody that's on set, the film, everybody that's involved with all the filming technology. And it's just everybody that's listed afterwards in the credits is doing something to contribute to this franchise. And they do it extremely well. And that's why it's an extremely successful franchise. So that's the RBV on a high 30,000 foot look. Do we have any questions? We got a shy lot today.
Emmanuel has a question, and I'm going to let him use his microphone.
Hi, my name is Emmanuel. My question is on franchise. The word, as I have known the meaning, seems to be when a business is sublet to another, but I seem to not understand the way you used it with regard to James Bond. Can you kind of explain further in relation to James Bond and also other?
I'm sorry, it was very, I didn't quite get the question. It was very low volume.
Okay, does it sound better now?
Yeah, go again.
So I said the word franchise, I understand it to be when a business is sublet, maybe to another company or individual. But I didn't understand the way you used it in regard to James Bond. Can you explain that?
Oh, right. So, well, yeah. The word James Bond is a franchise. I'm trying to think how to explain it. Bond is owned by the Broccoli family, and so when they franchise it, they're everything that belongs to Bond. So the let's go back. So the logos and all the merchandise that is associated with James Bond that you can buy separately outside of the film, that's all part of that franchise of James Bond. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So because they don't just do films, I mean, you can buy, you know, the kids can get the toy guns, and you can get the books, and you can get, there's all kinds of other products that you can buy that are associated with the James Bond mark. And so it's a franchise of all those products. Cool, that was a good question. Thank you, Emmanuel.
I don't think there are any other questions right now. So if you want
Okay, so we can move into the last of the matrix. So when you thought that you'd been doing enough data gathering, you've got another one coming up. And for those of you who don't know, that's the cartoon character of Inspector Clouseau. So we're going to be looking at the 5 forces. Now, this is also known, and you may know it as Porter's 5 forces. And again, the same question is, who's heard of 5 forces? And have you ever used it? Did we get any feedback on the others, Cecilia? We can go with those after. Let's go through this. Okay, the third and final matrix is, again, I've put it into the same format as a SWOT. So we've got it looking very similar. And the 5th matrix is competitive rivalry. So we have buyers and suppliers, and I'll explain the internal when we get to that a little bit later. And we have new market entry and substitution. The competitive rivalry is the thing, the subject matter that affects all of this, all right? This is the matrix. So if you remember, refresh you on the SWOT, you've got the strengths and weaknesses are internal to your organization, and the opportunities and threats are external. The resource-based view looked solely at the internal side of your organization, what goes on inside your organization, and the attributes that you put into that matrix would then be transposed onto the strengths and weaknesses of the SWOT. So now you're really building up your SWOT, and you've got your initial thoughts and attributes put on there, plus you've got the resource-based view. You've looked at yourself from a VRIO perspective, and you've added that into the strengths and weaknesses. 5 forces, you're going to be putting these attributes into the opportunities and the threats of the SWOT. It's an outward-looking matrix from within your organization that gives you an industry-wide analysis of your marketplace. There's a catch-22 to this, though, because if you can look out into the marketplace and see what your competitors are doing and how you're operating in that marketplace, guess what? Your competitors can look at you and see what you're doing as well. So it works in both ways. Whatever works for you, you know is going to work for your competition as well. So let's have a look at competitive rivalry. Let's start with that. And what I did was I built an activity map, not dissimilar to the Harvard one, and I wanted to go through that with you. So we'll start with the growth potential, and then what we'll do is we'll go around clockwise afterwards. So the kinds of things that you should be looking at. Well, and just before I go into this, what you will gather from going through this matrix is that there are a lot of similarities between the competitive rivalry and the new entry and the substitution. And so if you hear similar comments from me, that's because they are all impacted and they all intertwine with each other. So on growth potential, you want to look, are your markets growing, stagnating, or declining? And so this comes into market capacity, where is your market flooded or does it have room for growth? So these are the kind of basic questions that you need to ask when you're looking into the subject of competitive rivalry. If you get same or similar products, if the products are same or similar, are switching costs for you, if you're in a business, which is also known as your sunk costs, in your favor? If you've got money invested in your product and somebody comes in with something similar or the same as, how much have you put into that product? And do you have the resources and capabilities that you can counter that person coming in with the same or similar product? And they're things that you've got to be aware of. If you can't, then you're going to be looking at exit barriers. And maybe those exit barriers don't allow you to exit because you've spent too much money in there, and it may force you to survive against that product or similar product that's now giving you competition. On pre and post sales activities, not all organizations will have this, but for example, the automotive industry does, because once they've got warranties, they like to extend those warranties, and it makes them a lot of revenue. So when you bought a car from a dealer, you've got it under warranty, and then when the warranty runs out, they offer you extended warranties, and they get a lot of revenue, much more revenue coming in from that, from a post sale than they do from a direct sale. And pre-sales could be things like you have to run, for example, in the semiconductor industry, where equipment can cost several $1 million, any piece of equipment can cost several $1 million to put in your manufacturing line. You want to run product in that before you actually buy it to make sure it can be run. And so you would set up with the supplier how you do that. So there would be pre-sales costs to that as well. Cost variations. Does the competition have the ability to reduce their prices when you do not? Something you've got to think about, all right? And pricing strategies or a follow-on from the cost, are there standard pricing strategies that you have? So for example, are you doing cost plus? So you take the basic cost and you add a set margin on top of that. Are you doing competitive pricing? Are you going head to head with your competitors to see if you can counter their pricing? We find this in the retail clothing industry on an annual basis. When the sales come, everybody is lowering their prices. Or are you going to be doing value-based pricing? Value-based pricing is, do you have a product or a service that cures a customer's pain point, cures a problem for the customer and saves him money? And if you do, then you can price that at a premium, and so you get value-based pricing. Or you can do volume pricing. is your product such that the more volume you sell, the better it is for you? So that's another area that you would look at while you're doing, while you're examining the competitive rivalry in your marketplace. So you need to understand your market. And so I'm going to go through some, these are all kind of questions that I think you would need to look at whilst you're trying to understand your markets. What's the status of your marketplace? Again, this sounds familiar. How many firms are you competing with? Okay. And that takes you into geography. So which of these firms are competing in your geographical region? Now that may be important for you because the wider marketplace, you could get maybe competition, but that's not affecting you. But if they're in your geographic position, are they beginning to affect you? And there are things that you need to know. What do you have that's different? What's the difference between your organization and that of the competition? How do you become the yellow in the blue ball pack? Okay. Is it size? Is it how you use your resources and the capabilities within your organization? Like the James Bond organization? Or is it product differences? Do you do something that's going to be completely different, or it's a same or similar product, but it's better than your competitors? What's the competitor's attitude to you coming into market, or for you coming into a market, or vice versa? Are they hostile? Are they aggressive? Are they friendly? Or are they cooperative? And you can get all kind. I've seen each of these in different companies that I've been consulting with. I worked in the vacuum industry for a while, and it's amazing how they have competition, but they're reasonably friendly and cooperative with one another. Price competing. How do the firms compete? What characteristics do they deploy when they're competing with you? And what characteristics can you deploy that are different when competing with them? Price competition. Now we talked about price in the last one when you're looking at competitive rivalry. Do competitors compete on price or value-added features? They're the things that you're going to want to know. And we went through how you did those pricings before. And then, of course, from the price is the cost competition. Do competitors compete on any or thing like product development to try and productize what you're selling versus what they're selling? Do they compete on image, brand, or style, like you would do with Apple and Nike? Or do they compete through advertising or new product variances? So yeah, you have to go through these and you have to kind of answer the questions. And again, it's an in-depth subject, so we're trying to keep it at a higher level. And I've just raised the most important questions to ask. And while you're doing all this, you're going to be into the buying and the supplying. So this is where we move into next. The buyers and suppliers. And guess what? You are both a buyer and you're a supplier, because when you want to develop your products or your services, likely as not, you're going to be wanting to buy. So the suppliers of goods and services, to them, you're the customer, but you in your organization, you're the buyer. When you've made your product or service and you decide to send it out, then you're the supplier of the goods and services, and you've now got a customer who's the buyer. And guess what? You're not the only one that's in your marketplace. They say that when you move into the 5 forces, that businesses are born into a world of competitive advantage. And that's truly what happens. When you move into a business or you start a business, the competition's already there. You've got to assess what's going on in that marketplace. So the buyer-supplier game goes like this. As a buyer, you want to drive down prices. You want to demand higher quality from your suppliers. You maybe want guarantees and warranties, and you want to try and get the lowest cost price. And now when you built your product and you're supplying it, you want to squeeze profitability. You want to get as much as possible. You want to charge as higher prices. You want to capture as much value as possible. And maybe you have the opportunity to shift costs. So shifting costs may be that you could shift costs from the late stage production of your product to an earlier stage. And so you shift some costs out of that and you increase your margin. But it comes down to basic economics. The fewer suppliers there are, the lower the competition and the higher the prices. And again, it works both ways. And the more suppliers there are, the higher competition and the lower the prices. And that's why I put the buyers and suppliers as internal, because it will be driven from within inside your organization. So then we're going to look at new market entry and substitution. And again, we're going to do the same kind of vein. We're going to have a look at what are the costs of market entry. The organization or the business that you're taking has to weigh up the cost benefits ratio and decide if the costs are not too high to enter that market. I got an example here. When I was in Amsterdam, I noticed that the 80% of the taxis in Amsterdam were Teslas, and they were the S models. And when I asked about what was going on with that, because Teslas are pretty expensive, it was that the taxi owners could afford to buy an expensive Tesla, because the Amsterdam gave a lot of tax credits and subsidies because they had an electric vehicle and it was environmentally friendly. So the end cost was a lot less than what they actually paid out for the taxi cab in the first place. So there you go. You can enter what's the cost of entry in the market. How long will it take to enter a market? That's going to depend on your market, its size, its competitiveness. It can also be the amount of players in the market. So remember, we're coming back to saying, is your market flooded or has it grown? Yeah. The resources and capabilities to enter or to hold off the competition entering. And you have to determine the potential profits versus the costs. Conduct a return on investment analysis, for example. You know, Tesla, again, going back to Tesla, they created a market. They created the market for electric cars. Before then, there was Chevy Volt, I think, and maybe one other, but they actually made the market. And now, as you know, most of the automakers are now concentrating on making pure electric vehicles. When is it too costly to enter into a market? Well, it's never too costly if you have the economies of scale, or also known as the resources and capabilities. And we gave a great example of that with Southwest. Entering into the airline industry is expensive, but Southwest and JetBlue have done this in the US, as well as Ryanair and EasyJet in Europe. They all managed to enter the market. So if you're determined to get into a market and you can gather the resources and the capabilities, and you have an idea like Southwest did on how you can use the same product but differently, then you can probably enter into those markets. How will competition respond? Competition can counter your entry, and remember this works on the other side of the coin as well, by adjusting their pricing strategies, which we've talked about, increasing their advertising. Again, we've gone through that. They can enhance or add product features, which is what Southwest did. In fact, they actually took them away. They took product features away to make it more cost effective. For example, they don't do transfer baggage, and they don't coordinate with other airlines for connections. So they took away cost, they took away features, which made it more productive and cost effective for them to enter. Competition must have measurably greater resources and capabilities to counter an organization's entry. And the same for you. If you've got a competitor that's coming in, you need to have the resources and capabilities to be able to counter that competitor coming into the market. And lastly, can you execute in that marketplace? And if you're successful in a particular market, doesn't mean to say that you have the required expertise or experience or even the skill set to succeed in another vertical. Now, if you look at the example of Tesla again, they were successful because they took their base battery power storage in the electric vehicle and turned that into a power storage for people with homes with solar and for the mega packs for the city in Australia. So that was a market they had experience in. But I worked for I was contracting with a company in the vacuum product market. And they were a repair and rebuild company of vacuum pumps. And they're very successful. They're a great company. All their customers knew them. They've been going for 24 years and repairing and rebuilding vacuum pumps. And they decided they wanted to move into the new business of selling new vacuum pumps. And the strategies that weren't put in place to accommodate that business meant that trying to get that business off the ground was protracted. So time costs money, and it did cost them more money in the end to actually get that product up and running, because their customers knew them as repair and rebuild. They didn't realize that they were new customers, that they would also sell new pumps. So they had to go through a new marketing strategy. They had to get new sales. They had to get new people on that understood what it was to sell to new markets and not to refurbished markets, and so on and so forth. And so just because you can execute one marketplace, it's not accepted that you can actually be successful in another vertical. You need to do your homework, make sure you can find out you can do that. So just as a recap here, the resource-based view the resource-based view matrix pops into the strengths and weaknesses of the SWOT, and the 5 forces pops into the opportunities and threats. Now, at the end of the day, I hope that you're going to be convinced that you have a powerful tool here. There's a lot of data, and once you start examining all this data, I've managed to put it into a simple format that is comprehensible and makes sense. I hope that I've convinced you that that's a good strategy, and that is a good use of how you collect data and you use it. And if you need more information on that, I suggest you do buy the book when it comes out in March, hopefully, but latest April anyway. And you can contact me through email or through LinkedIn or through my Strategic Global Group Facebook page. And we can take any questions you have on 5 forces.
So there's 2 questions. I think one was actually from the previous section, but it's when evaluating history, how do you avoid hard feelings? I've found in small business that history discussions start down a path of who has pulled more weight or been held back.
Right, and that's absolutely true. But this is what I said at the beginning. You're going to have detrimental comments, and you're going to have negative comments coming through when you start looking at, when you start examining, for example, why your business is not doing as well as it is. What should happen is that the conversation should start with, you know, we're in this particular predicament. We have to find out why. And so in doing that, we're going to come across some uncomfortable truths. But you have to remember, all these uncomfortable truths, whatever they are, they're positive points, because now you realize if you can go and look through your history and say, we didn't get to this particular point because we didn't do X, Y, Z. That's the fact that you now realize that you did not do X, Y, Z is a positive. You need to turn that negative into a positive and say, what can we do to make sure that we now complete X, Y, Z and improve our market share? And that's the way you've really got to look at this. The whole process of this simple strategic planning process is based on being honest, and people have to accept the fact that maybe they had one or two shortfalls, maybe other people had one or two shortfalls. It's not a knock. There's no retribution. There shouldn't be any penalization. It's look at what's gone wrong and put it right going forward.
There's another question. Can the lack of competitive rivalry be indicative of a dying industry? Can it be indicative of an emerging monopoly?
Can it be indicative of a dying industry? Lack of competitive rivalry, there'll always be competitive rivalry. But yeah, I would imagine yes, it could. If an industry is dying. I've not come across an industry in my time that's died, although many have died in the past. And what was the other side?
Or can it be indicative of an emerging monopoly?
Yes. Look at what we're using now, Zoom. Okay. So pre-COVID, nobody knew Zoom and everybody flew to their meetings. Post-COVID, nobody flies to meetings and everybody's using Zoom. So that's a huge cost difference for companies. My wife, who works in the semiconductor industry, she's working from home. It's changed the way the world happens. Netflix was a major change to the cable TV networks. As more people cutting the cable and going to Netflix and Redbox and all these independent ones now than there was before. So, yeah, same or similar products. Yeah, sure, they're gonna affect your industry. It's the trick is, can you see it? I'm just trying to think of one. Red Bull, is it Red Bull, the power drink? Okay, that was a substitute for coffees. Yeah, and then in between that, you got that little 5-hour rush drink you could get. I can't remember what they're called, but the small bottles, 5-hour, and you take those, and it gives you a high for a while. So they're competitors to the coffee shops. You got to look at. You can't look at what's obvious as competitive rivalry. You got to look at what new technologies are coming onto the market, and technologies don't necessarily have to be technical electrical things. When the Egyptians invented papyrus and started writing, that was the new technology of the day. People could now record, whereas before they couldn't. So you have to look. You have to be always looking at the competitive rivalry. It's always there. It's always attacking your company. It's not something you can rest on.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question. Do you know of any online resources you could point us towards so we can have a guide to get started on all 3 of these exercises? I will say this whole presentation will be, and the recording will be posted, including the slides on our website, which I will link in the chat. But if you have any other recommendations, Phil.
Well, you can come to me. I don't mind if you got my email from the beginning. I'm sure you'll screenshot it somewhere. And like I said, I'm on LinkedIn under Phil Wilton, and I've got Strategic Global Group Facebook page. If you want to know some more information, I would recommend having a look at an article called Looking Inside for Competitive Advantage by Jay Barney. That's Jaybarney. And look at Porter's Five Forces. He's got very good articles out on his Five Forces matrix. What they do is they all work them independently. What I do is in my book, I have like strategic planning in 5 moves. And the first move takes you through what you need to understand about your business and how your business is situated and what the failures of making a strategic plan can often be. And it also looks at your history and where you are now. And then the second, third, and fourth move are the SWOT, the resource-based view, and 5 forces. And the fifth move is how you actually interconnect those dots and use that information to build a strategic plan. So nobody's done that at the moment, which is why I've done that, and which is why I'm publishing on that.
Okay, thank you.
And I can add I do have a number of papers. So I do have quite a few papers by well-renowned strategists. So I can probably point you in the right directions for whatever subject matter you're looking at.
So Phil's available as a resource. If you want to talk to him after this presentation, you can send him an email. We have one last question before we wrap up today, and this one is, when doing an RBV matrix, is there significance in making a distinction between a tangible or intangible resource?
Is there a significance between them? No, tangible resources are the physical assets that you can have, see, touch, feel, use, not use. Intangible assets are, as we went through, the human side, all right, the workflows and the processes that are operating within your organization. All resources have to add value, and if they don't add value in your organization, why do you have them? All right. So even though whether they're tangible or intangible, but I think to more answer your question, on intangible resources, these are the things you can't feel and touch, like the tacit knowledge, like how does let's go back to the 3 examples, the sales, marketing, and service. How does marketing put together from the information it's got a credible list of value-added features to a product that the salesman has to sell to the customer? All right. And so when you look inside the marketing department, it's how do they gather that information together to be able to put it into a sales pitch for the salesman to go and sell it. Trying to think of some other examples in my head. I'm not sure. Did I answer the question?
I think so. I mean, you're saying like it's not you don't necessarily have to differentiate between tangible and intangible, but you do need to identify both types.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The tangible stuff is where the organization you work in. All right, it's all the fairly touchy stuff that the computers, the desk, everything that's in the organization. It has to add some value to what is delivering the end product. The intangible stuff is all that other non-physical assets that you have that you need to bring to the forefront and be able to exploit and deploy.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for attending, and thank you so much, Phil, for giving us this presentation. It was a lot of great information. And for those of you who would like to view the slides or view the presentation again, it'll be posted on our New Mexico Rainforest website by the end of the day tomorrow. And then there's also a link to a quiz that you can take if you are interested in completing your entrepreneurial capabilities certificate. So thank you, everybody, and we will hopefully see you at our next webinar. Thank you, Phil.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.